In this video I'm going to go through how I added a small lamp to the rear of this guard's van, although it's suitable for any rear facing piece of rolling stock, whether it's a guard's van, wagon or coach. This is the prototype I did and I think it works quite well. Basically what I'm trying to achieve is a small lamp on the rear with a red flickering lamp, which you might just be able to see. Quite simple really. All I've done is I've got a battery holder, on off switch and a LED inside there which you can't see, and I've added a piece of fibre optic cable to that LED so that it shines through to the rear lamp. Very simple. And the advantage of that of course is I don't have to change the wheels and I don't have to worry about pickup from the live rails or what voltage, it's DC or DCC, whatever, it will still work. So what do you need? Well, basically you're going to need some sort of rolling stock that you're quite willing to hack about and possibly damage in the process. You're going to need some sort of rear lamp. These are the ones that I've used for my little prototype here. Springfield Models 00 gauge assorted lamps. You are going to need a battery holder. You're obviously going to need a battery. You're going to need some sort of LED. I've used flickering LEDs because I think they try and mimic a oil lamp, which is the effect I was after. And you're going to need an on-off switch so that you can turn it off and the battery doesn't drain away when you're not using it, although no doubt I'll forget and it will drain away anyway. But fortunately the batteries are pretty cheap. I'm going to list where you can get these from. Obviously there's hundreds of different suppliers, but most of this stuff I've bought off eBay from memory. What I like about doing this way is the batteries are 3 volts and the LEDs are more or less 3 volts, so we don't have to worry about any sort of resistors. We just connect the battery straight to the LED and it will illuminate. This one's red, which I bought off eBay, and this one is yellow if you wanted a front facing oil lamp, which I took out of one of those tea lights that you get. So first thing you're going to need is a piece of rolling stock to put the light on, whether it's going to be a coach or a guards van, and I've got some guards vans here. Let's choose this one here. And the first thing you're going to have to do is take it apart, which is going to be the most dangerous part, because what I've found is that these tend to be glued together. This one you can see I've already started and it quite easily comes apart. The little tabs here have snapped off, but that's no big deal because we're going to glue it back on anyway. Okay, now we're going to have to modify this by cutting a hole in the bottom so that the LED has got somewhere to go and the wiring can go in there as well. And obviously the battery and the switch are going to sit on the bottom so that we can access both once we've glued it all back together. This is a bit of a tight fit, but it should work. The battery holder and the switch have both got tiny little pins on them, which hopefully you can just about see those. They obviously need to go through the bottom of the chassis, so it's just a question of making enough holes in the bottom of the chassis for the battery holder and the switch. Fortunately for this one, the bottom of the van is actually flat, so we haven't really got to do much more than drill a few holes, which is nice. On my little prototype one here, if you can just see it where the on-off switch is, you can see that webbing that sticks up from the bottom, which is a bit annoying because I had to grind all that off so that I could stick on the battery holder and the on-off switch. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put some holes in the bottom of this, and I'm going to cut out a rectangular hole in the bottom of that to give me enough room to get all the gubbins in here and also fix the battery and the on-off switch to here. Okay, we've got to rewind a little bit. One thing I didn't mention earlier, which is pretty essential to this, is this stuff, fibre optic cable. This one is 1mm diameter, which if we're working in 00 gauge at 4mm to the foot, means that in scale this is about 3 inches in diameter, which is about right for a lamp. Perhaps we could have it a little bit bigger, but that's fine by us. 1mm diameter. And all this does is, as you can probably see, if I hold one end up to the light and hold this end to the camera, you can see it getting bright, and that's what we really want to do. So 1mm fibre optic cable. I've already drilled the hole in the little lamp I'm going to use, which is only a LED lamp, so very delicate and obviously quite easy to break it. So a bit careful drilling a 1mm hole through that. I've cut the hole in the base of the van, and as you can probably tell, I obviously can't cut this any further than this line here, because it then cut a hole in the floor of the visible part of the van, so just be careful where you cut the hole. So holes cut. I've drilled 4 holes in the chassis using no more than this. It's very easy to get through the plastic, and you might be able to see in the light, but now we've got 4 little terminals sticking up through, which are obviously the terminals of the switch and the battery holder. So I've just super glued those into place. So that's done. I need to put some wiring in there. That's ready. Next thing I'm now going to do is I'm going to paint the lamp now and go on to the next stage. So while my lamp is drying, I've got to get the end of this fibre optic cable into the end of this LED, so the light is transmitted, and obviously we need a method of getting this fixed to this so that it's held in place nice and snugly. The way I've come up with is simply drill a hole in the end of the LED, just deep enough so that the cable is held in place, but obviously not so deep so that it ends up drilling into the anode and the cathode inside there, which will obviously destroy it. Obviously this is a little bit tricky because you're trying to drill into the end of a domed surface. These are domed LEDs. So what I've done is I've just come up with a very simple jig, which is no more than a piece of nylon with a 5mm hole drilled part way through and a 1mm hole drilled all the way through. So the idea being, I take my 5mm LED, I put it in the jig, and I've got a 1mm hole which I can drill through. And as it turns out, using my little Dremel drill, if I place it in the end there, turn on the drill, push that in as far as it will go, that looks about right. And if you can just see this now, I've drilled into the end of the LED and I've just stopped short of the anode and cathode. Let's just test to make sure it actually works. There we go, it's still working. Destroyed it. So all I need to do now is take my piece of fibre optic cable and glue that into the hole in the end of the LED so it's held in nice and firmly. I tend to use UHU glue because obviously you want to try and maintain a light transmitting contact, and I think UHU works well. I think you could just use Superglue, would do just a good job. So let's do that. Okay, so I've glued that in now, that's set. I've actually used Superglue just to see if it works as well as UHU glue, and it does seem to be absolutely fine. So if I give this a little test here, put that around the right way might help. There we go. So that's illuminated, and what we're after is a little light on the end of the fibre optic, which hopefully you can see. There it is. So that's good. That's fine. I've wired up the chassis, so I've put a battery in there and just checked that wiring is okay. It's very simple. Obviously, it's just a very simple circuit. Battery plus and minus going through the switch, so it gives me 2 switches, 2 cables, one positive and one negative. That's important for LEDs because they will only work the right way round. So the positive is on the anode, which is always the long wire on the LED. If I turn that around, it won't light, so it has to be the right way around to work. So I've used the same cable on here because I can quite easily see which one is the positive and which one is the negative. But if it was any more complicated, I would have probably changed the colour of the cable so that I kept the right positive wire to the LED. I've painted the lamp, which I've actually done two, just so I can do two at once. So now I need to assemble the LED to the wires and just check that all works okay. So there we go, I've wired the LED to the two wires coming from the battery and the switch. That's all working. I always tend to keep checking that to make sure it's all working still okay, because obviously if you go wrong and make a mess, it's not that much of a problem to replace, but it is once you've fit it all together. So that's good. Good shining light coming out of the end of the fibre optic. I haven't bothered with any shrouding on any of this wire because it's such a simple and short circuit. It's very unlikely I'm going to get a short circuit. And in any case, what I'm now going to do is I'm now going to paint the LED and the two short stems coming out of it black. And the reason why I want to do that is because if I put that in the case of the guard's wagon, I'm going to get a fair amount of light bleeding out the end, which would look a bit daft. So I'm going to give this a coat of paint. Normally needs two coats, and I can obviously paint the terminals as well, and that will give me an extra bit of protection from any short circuits. The other one thing I need to do at the moment is drill a hole through the end of the guard's van where I want the lamp to be, and if you can see on this one here, we've got two lamp brackets already shown in the moulding, so either of those will do me. With this particular style of guard's van, the one compromise you have to make is we obviously need to show the fibre optic cable going through this portal here, which obviously is a compromise because it's unavoidable. So if you look at my sort of little prototype, you can see that in that gap is the fibre optic cable. If that's a problem to you, we could, I suppose, mount it on the buffer block, but I'm not too fussed about that. It doesn't hardly ever show up. So I'm going to do that. Now it's important to try and get those holes through this partition and this partition as straight as possible, because what we don't want is we don't want the lamp slightly to one side cocked over, because it will then look a bit odd. So I'm going to try and get those two lined up as perfectly as I can, and then we're just about finished and we can start reassembling it. So I've painted the LED black. You can still see I've got a little bit of light bleed coming through there, so I'm going to touch that in. This is still working fine, as you can see by the end of the fibre optic. All I need to do now is feed the fibre optic from the inside to the outside of the van. So it's a bit fiddly because I need to get the 1mm fibre optic cable through a 1mm hole. So I'm going to try and do that now. I'll give that a touch in and I'll poke the fibre optic cable through, and I need to leave that link overhanging outside by about 2 inches or so. The reason for that will become apparent in a moment, so now I'm going to do that. Okay, I've threaded that through. As it turns out, I can take the roof off this van just so you can easily see what I'm doing. I've pushed the LED up to the partition, and the reason why I want to do that is because I'm going to cut this fibre optic about 1 inch, 2 inches off. Probably about where my fingers are. And the reason why I want to do that is so when it's cut off, I can push the lamp up against the partition, and the LED has got room to move. So actually, looking at that, probably I want about 1 inch, no more than that. So there we go. So I'm going to thread on the lamp, cut that off about 1 inch, and there's one final thing I need to do before we reassemble it, and we'll do that in a second. One thing I forgot to say is, not in this particular guard's van, but I've noticed in some of my others, there is a little steel weight that exists between the body and the chassis to give it a bit of weight, and this is one I'm taking from another one. So obviously before we reassemble, if you want to include that back in, I guess it's included just to give the van a bit of weight so it doesn't jump off at points. Obviously you need, without the roof being able to take off, you'd just need to feed something in here, and I found just a couple of small bolts just super glued into the corners is adequate, because obviously I can't use the flat panel anymore because the wiring is all in the way. So don't forget to do that before we reassemble. Right, okay, we're almost all there. What I've done is I've cut off the fibre optic cable to about 1/2 inch. I've put the lamp on just loosely, and the reason why I've done that is because I want to push the fibre optic cable back in and as you can see inside there, the LED has enough room to move back. The reason why I want to do that is I want to try and dome off the end of the fibre optic cable so that it keeps the lamp on, and B, it looks slightly realistic as a lens on a lamp. I don't think I'm going to do that on this one because it's a bit inconvenient to try and show that on the camera, but I've got a loose piece here, and I'll show you all I'm really doing, and I'm not sure this is going to focus particularly well, but I have a soldering iron, and if I just very lightly tap the fibre optic cable into the soldering iron, the end will just slightly dome up. You probably can't see it very clearly, but I'm going to do that on that part there, and I've left myself enough room that if I make a mess of it, I can cut off a bit and try again. But in some instances you don't even need to touch the actual soldering iron, just getting it close to the heat is enough to make it dome up. So I'm going to do that on that, push the LED back into the van and put a tiny amount of super glue on the back of the lamp so that it's sat against the back wall here. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so we're all been put back together now. Glued the chassis to the body, and there's our little lamp, which looks quite nice, I think. Not be able to see it because of the light above. You can obviously see the fibre optic cable going through the lobby of the van, which doesn't stick out too much, so I'm happy with that. So yeah, hopefully that's given you some ideas. You can obviously use a variety of thicknesses of fibre optic cable to achieve this. I've just happened to have some 1mm, which is probably ideal for these lamps. So there we go. Pleased with that.